Question. Short note on Doctrine of Eclipse. Hello friends. Today we will discuss one of the most important judicial doctrines used to protect fundamental rights, the Doctrine of Eclipse. The Doctrine of Eclipse is a principle developed by the Supreme Court of India to deal with laws that become inconsistent with fundamental rights after the Constitution came into force. According to this doctrine, when a pre-constitution law is found to be inconsistent with any fundamental right, it is not completely dead or void. Instead, it is only eclipsed or overshadowed by the fundamental right. The law remains on the statute book but becomes inoperative and unenforceable to the extent it violates the fundamental right. The most important feature of this doctrine is that if the conflicting fundamental right is later amended or removed, the eclipsed law can automatically revive and become fully operative again without needing fresh legislation. This distinguishes it from the doctrine of severability. The leading case on the doctrine of eclipse is Bikaji Narayan Dakras versus State of Madhya Pradesh 1955. In this case, the CP and Berar Motor Vehicles Act 1939 gave the state government the power to take over motor transport business. When the constitution came into force, this provision became inconsistent with Article 19(1)(g), the right to carry on any occupation, trade or business. The Supreme Court held that the law was not dead but only eclipsed by Article 19(1). G. When the first constitutional amendment added reasonable restrictions under Article 19(6), the eclipsed provision automatically revived and became valid again. Another important case is Deep Chand versus State of Uttar Pradesh, 1959. The court clarified that the doctrine of eclipse applies only to pre-constitution laws and not to post-constitution laws. If a law is made after the constitution and it violates a fundamental right, it is void ab initio from the beginning and cannot be revived by the doctrine of eclipse in State of Gujarat versus Ambika Mills 1974. The Supreme Court further explained that the doctrine applies when there is a conflict between a pre-existing law and a fundamental right. The law is eclipsed only to the extent of the inconsistency and remains valid for persons or situations not covered by the fundamental right. Characteristics of the doctrine of eclipse. It applies only to pre-constitution laws. The law is not completely void but only temporarily inoperative. It can revive automatically if the conflicting fundamental right is amended or removed. It reflects judicial restraint and respect for legislative will. It helps in maintaining continuity of laws while protecting fundamental rights. Friends, the doctrine of eclipse is a fine example of the Supreme Court's balanced approach. It protects fundamental rights without unnecessarily destroying old laws. It allows the legislature's intention to survive while ensuring constitutional supremacy. This doctrine has helped the court strike a harmonious balance between pre-existing laws and the new constitutional order. In conclusion, the doctrine of eclipse is an important judicial tool under Article 13. It declares that a pre-constitution law inconsistent with fundamental rights is eclipsed but not dead. Through landmark cases like Bikaji Narayan Dakras and Deep Chand, the Supreme Court has clearly laid down its scope and limitations. This doctrine ensures that laws are not struck down lightly and can revive when the constitutional conflict is resolved. It is a shining example of how the judiciary protects fundamental rights while showing respect for legislative continuity. Jai Bharat!